I was scrolling through my old friend Alex's profile on a social media platform, catching up on what he'd been up to. We hadn't talked in months, but his posts seemed to have piqued my curiosity. He had mentioned something about an interesting project he'd been working on in the past few weeks. I couldn't help but feel a pang of curiosity, and before I knew it, I was sending him a message asking if I could take a look at what he had found. Alex responded almost immediately, his tone cryptic as always. "I've stumbled upon something that might interest you," he wrote. "A website hidden deep within the dark web. It's been there for years, but only recently did it become accessible again." My heart began to beat faster as I read those words. The dark web was a place most people avoided, a realm of cybercrime and unsavory characters. But Alex seemed different. He had always been the curious type, always poking around in places where others wouldn't dare. "What's on this website?" I asked him, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause before Alex replied. "I'm not entirely sure," he said, "but it seems to be some sort of archive." An archive. That piqued my interest even further. I felt a thrill run down my spine as I realized that this could be the discovery of a lifetime. "Let's do it," I typed before hitting send. Alex responded almost immediately, his message filled with an air of excitement and trepidation. I clicked on the link he had sent me and was immediately transported to a dark and foreboding website. The URL was long and convoluted, but one thing was certain: this was not your average website. The screen faded in, revealing a simple interface with a single phrase etched into it: "Welcome to the archives of eternity." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read those words. What had Alex gotten us into? As we delved deeper into the website, it became clear that this was no ordinary forum. The interface was ancient, with a design that seemed to have been plucked straight from a 19th century occult text. The background was a deep, foreboding red, and the font used for the text was an eerie, flickering script. The content on the site was disturbing, to say the least. There were images of strange symbols and rituals, accompanied by cryptic texts that seemed to reference a world known as Jathic. I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine as I scrolled through the pages. One image in particular caught my eye. It was an old photograph, showing a group of robed figures gathered around a large stone altar. They seemed to be engaged in some sort of dark ritual, and their faces were twisted into grotesque, inhuman grins. I turned to Alex, who was studying the text accompanying the image. "What is this?" I asked him, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure," he replied, his eyes fixed on the screen. "But it looks like some sort of ancient cult." As we continued to explore the site, we stumbled upon more and more disturbing content. There were texts that spoke of an otherworldly presence, one that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. "This is getting creepy," said Sarah, our group's resident skeptic. "I don't like this." "Neither," I replied, feeling a growing sense of unease. "But we have to know more. What is Jathic? That's the question, isn't it?" said Alex, his voice low and serious. As we delved deeper into the website, the group began to notice strange glitches and anomalies. The usually stable interface would flicker and distort, displaying cryptic error messages that seemed to be in an ancient language. At first, we wrote it off as a result of the site's age and poor maintenance, attributing the creepy feeling to fatigue and stress. However, as the glitches intensified, our unease grew. The air around us seemed to thicken, making it harder to breathe. Our skin prickled with goosebumps, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah let out a nervous laugh, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. "This is just some weird website," she said, her voice laced with skepticism. We can't take it seriously." But Alex was quiet, his eyes fixed on the screen as if mesmerized by something only he could see. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I watched him, wondering what he saw that I didn't. The glitches grew more frequent and intense, casting an eerie glow over our faces. It was as if we were being pulled into some sort of dark world, one where the laws of reality no longer applied. "Guys, I think we should get out of here," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is getting too weird." But it was too late. The website had already begun to change us, to warp our perceptions and blur the lines between reality and madness. And then everything went black. As the group received a series of cryptic messages from an unknown sender, they began to suspect that Jathic was more than just a mysterious website. The messages were laced with disturbing imagery and eerie metaphors that unsettled the group's collective psyche. It was as if the sender knew their deepest fears and was using them against them. The first message arrived on my phone, its screen glowing with an otherworldly light. "You shouldn't be here," it read. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this wasn't just a prank. Someone was watching us, waiting for us to uncover the truth about Jathic. The messages continued to flow, each one more disturbing than the last. There were images of twisted rituals, grotesque creatures lurking in the shadows, and cryptic symbols etched into walls that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. The group was torn between fascination and terror as we struggled to decipher the meaning behind these eerie messages. Sarah, ever the skeptic, tried to dismiss it all as some kind of psychological experiment gone wrong. But I knew better. I could feel it in my bones that Jathic was more than just a website. It was a doorway to something ancient and malevolent, something that lurked just beyond the edge of our perception. As we delved deeper into the messages, the group began to experience strange occurrences that hinted at a connection between Jathic and their own dark pasts. Dreams, nightmares, and visions all seemed to be linked to the website, as if it was awakening some deep-seated fears within us. The sender's messages became more frequent, more urgent, and more personal. "You're getting close," they wrote, "but are you ready for what you'll find?" The group was on edge, unsure of what lay ahead but certain that we were being pulled into a world from which there was no escape. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The messages ceased, the website went dark, and an oppressive silence fell over us like a shroud. As the group continued to explore the website, they started to experience vivid hallucinations and nightmares. They began to question their own sanity and wonder if they were losing their grip on reality. The lines between what was real and what was just a product of their fevered imaginations started to blur. Sarah would see strange creatures lurking in the shadows, while Alex would hear whispers in his ear when no one was around. I would find myself staring at a blank wall, only to realize that I was still sitting in front of my computer, surrounded by the same familiar walls of our apartment. The website seemed to be playing tricks on us, manipulating our perceptions and pushing us to the edge of madness. We started to turn on each other, accusing each other of fabricating the experiences we had shared. "You're just trying to scare me," Sarah would say, her voice laced with anger. "No, I'm telling you it's real," Alex would reply, his eyes wide with fear. The website seemed to be feeding off our paranoia, amplifying our fears and doubts. We were trapped in a never-ending cycle of terror and confusion, unable to escape the grip of Jathic. And yet we couldn't help but keep exploring, drawn in by some morbid fascination with the dark and unknown. The website seemed to be calling to us, tempting us deeper into the depths of madness. We were playing with fire and we knew it, but we couldn't resist the allure of the unknown, the thrill of discovery that came with each new revelation. We were sleepwalking into a nightmare, and there was no turning back. The group encountered strange, ghostly apparitions within the website. At first, they believed it was just a prank or a glitch, but soon realized that these entities were interacting with them in disturbing ways. They started to notice that certain characters would appear and disappear at random, only to reappear moments later with eerie grins on their faces. Others would whisper cryptic messages in their ears, making Sarah's skin crawl with unease. Alex would find himself face to face with a ghostly figure that seemed to be made of shifting shadows, its eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. I would see fragments of myself standing in the corner of my vision, only to turn and realize that no one was there. The apparitions were always just out of reach, tantalizing us with their presence before vanishing into thin air. One night, Sarah woke up to find herself face to face with a ghostly figure sitting on her bed. Its eyes were black as coal, and its presence seemed to fill the room with an unspeakable malevolence. She screamed until her voice was hoarse, but when she opened her eyes again, the figure was gone. The group realized that they had to be careful not to let their fear get the better of them. They tried to stick together, supporting each other through the darkest moments of our stay on Jathik. But even as we held onto each other, we couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched by unseen eyes. The apparitions seemed to be learning from us, adapting their tactics to exploit our deepest fears. They would whisper our darkest secrets in our ears, making us question our own sanity. They would appear in our dreams, taunting us with visions of unspeakable horrors. We knew that we had to find a way to escape the website before it was too late. But every time we thought we had found a way out, the apparitions would intervene, blocking our path and trapping us back in the never-ending nightmare of Jathik. The group's experiences escalated as they encountered equipment functions, unexplained noises, and eerie movement. They started to suspect that Jathik was manipulating their environment. Equipment would turn on by itself, capturing strange footage and audio recordings that seemed to defy explanation. The group would hear whispers in the night, only to find no one around. Doors would slam shut on their own, making Alex jump with a start every time. I would see objects moving out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and realize they were just a trick of the light. Sarah would feel an icy breeze when she was alone in her room, even though the window was closed. The group started to suspect that Jathik was not just a website, but a living, breathing entity that was manipulating their reality. They began to investigate the origins of the website, searching for any clues that could explain what was happening. But every time they dug deeper, they found more questions than answers. It was as if Jathik was hiding in plain sight, waiting for them to uncover its secrets. The group knew they had to be careful, but they couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being watched by an unseen presence. One night, they decided to set up a camera in their room, hoping to catch some evidence of what was happening. But when they reviewed the footage the next day, they found something that made their blood run cold. The group discovered that they had been manipulated into participating in a twisted online ritual designed to summon Jathik's power. They were faced with an impossible decision: continue or abandon the website. The ritual required them to make a choice, one that would determine their fate and that of those around them. The website presented them with a series of questions, each one more disturbing than the last. Would they choose to surrender to Jathik's power, risking their very souls? Or would they abandon the website, leaving behind the secrets and mysteries that had drawn them in? the group was torn apart by conflicting desires. Some were tempted by the promise of power and knowledge, while others were repulsed by the twisted nature of the ritual. As they debated, the website seemed to adapt to their decisions, presenting them with new challenges and obstacles. It was as if Jathik itself was watching them, waiting for them to make a choice. The group knew that they had to be careful, but they couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being pulled into a web of deceit. One by one, they began to make their decisions, each one leading them further down a path from which there was no return. Some chose to continue, convinced that the reward was worth the risk. Others abandoned the website, hoping to escape the darkness that lurked within. But regardless of their choice, they knew that they would never be the same again. The ritual had changed them, imbuing them with a newfound awareness of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the internet. They were no longer the same group of friends who had once explored the website out of curiosity. Now, they were vessels for something darker, something more sinister. And as they looked at each other, they knew that their lives would never be the same again. The group struggled to escape the website, trapped in an endless labyrinth of distorted corridors and surreal landscapes. They experienced intense psychological torment as their deepest fears and darkest memories surfaced. Every door they opened led to a new nightmare. Every window offered only a glimpse of more terror. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the screen, her face pale and frozen in terror. She had seen things that no human should ever have to see. Visions of burning cities, of screaming children, of loved ones torn apart by unseen forces. John tried to comfort her, but even his own voice was laced with fear. He knew that they were all trapped, that there was no escape from the website's grasp. The further they delved into the depths of the site, the more their minds began to unravel. Emily's grip on reality started to slip, her words slurred and nonsensical. She spoke of ancient deities, of forbidden knowledge, of secrets that were meant to remain buried. Mike's eyes had taken on a manic glint, his voice rising with excitement as he described the horrors they had encountered. He was no longer in control, consumed by a madness that threatened to destroy them all. As they navigated this twisted world, the group began to realize that they were not alone. They heard whispers in the darkness, saw shadowy figures lurking just out of sight. The website seemed to be alive, and it was determined to keep them trapped forever. The true horror of Jathik was revealed. It fed on human fear and despair. The group realized that they had been playing into its hands all along, and now they were the main course in an unspeakable feast. As they gazed upon the twisted visage of their tormentor, they felt a sense of sickening recognition. They had unleashed this monster by seeking out its secrets, by tempting fate and poking at the dark corners of the internet. And now, as they beheld the full horror of Jathik's power, they knew that they were doomed to be consumed by it. The creature's eyes burned with an otherworldly energy, a malevolent force that seemed to pierce through their very souls. It spoke in a voice that was like 1,000 midnights, its words dripping with honeyed poison as it revealed the true extent of its power. The group knew that they were no match for this being, that they had played into its hands, and now they would be forced to pay the price. As Jathik's gaze locked onto theirs, they felt their minds begin to unravel, their sanity splintering like glass beneath the creature's cold, calculating gaze. They knew that they were trapped in a living nightmare from which there was no escape, a realm of madness and terror where the very fabric of reality had been torn apart. And as the darkness closed in around them, they realized that they would never be free again. The group's screams were drowned out by the sound of their own minds shattering. their sanity consumed by the abyssal horrors that lurked within Jathic's realm. They were no longer human, but vessels for the creature's dark power, their souls forever trapped in a cycle of terror and despair. And so, the true horror of Jathic was revealed. It was not a monster, but a manifestation of humanity's deepest fears. It was the product of our own darkness, our own capacity for cruelty and destruction. The group knew that they had unleashed this horror upon the world, and now they would have to live with the consequences of their actions. The website's screen flickered twice before plunging into an eternal blackness, and in that darkness, the group's screams were forever silenced. One by one, the group members began to succumb to the website's influence. They turned against each other, revealing their darkest secrets and succumbing to madness. The once united group was now a fractured and broken entity, torn apart by the very force they had sought to harness. The first to fall was Sarah, who had always been the most skeptical of the group's plans. She had always felt like an outsider, and now she saw that she had been right to doubt them all along. As she gazed into the website's dark mirror, she revealed her deepest fears and insecurities, and in doing so, she surrendered to its power. Next was John, who had been the group's de facto leader. He had always prided himself on his strength and leadership abilities, but now he found himself unable to resist the website's influence. He began to make decisions that were increasingly erratic and cruel, and soon the group was at each other's throats. As the days passed, more and more members of the group succumbed to the website's power. Emily, who had always been the most empathetic of the group, became a cold and calculating monster, reveling in the suffering of others. Michael, who had always been the voice of reason, lost himself in a sea of madness, unable to distinguish reality from fantasy. And so the group continued to fracture and break apart, each member succumbing to their own unique brand of madness. The website's influence spread like a disease, infecting every last one of them until there was nothing left but a hollow shell of what they once were. In the end, only one member of the group remained, a lone survivor who had managed to hold on to her sanity despite the website's best efforts to destroy her. She stood alone, surrounded by the ruins of her former life, and gazed out upon a world that was forever changed by the horrors she had unleashed. The website's influence still lingered, however, and it continued to exert its power over the lone survivor. It whispered sweet nothings in her ear, tempting her with promises of power and control. And so she began to succumb, bit by bit, until there was nothing left but a shell of her former self. The website's final victory was complete. The group had been broken, and now it was ready to be consumed. The lone survivor was the last remnant of what once was, and soon she would join the others in their eternal slumber, trapped forever in the abyssal realm of the website's creation. In a desperate bid for survival, confronts Jathic head-on. However, in doing so, they inevitably become its latest victim, surrendering to the abyss of madness and despair. Their eyes locked with those of the creature, and for a moment time stood still. Felt a sense of trepidation wash over them, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of determination. They steeled themselves for the confrontation ahead, knowing that it would be their last stand. "So this is the end," they whispered, their voice barely audible over the pounding of their heart. Jathic's response was immediate and crushing. Its presence enveloped, suffocating them with an unending sense of despair. The creature's influence seeped into their mind, eroding their resolve and leaving them vulnerable to its whims. "You should not have come here," Jathic hissed, its voice like a cold wind blowing through his very soul. Tried to resist, but it was too late. They felt themselves being drawn into the abyss, their sanity slipping away with each passing moment. The creature's power was too great, and they were powerless to stop it. As the darkness closed in around them, realized that they had become exactly what they had feared. They had succumbed to the very madness and despair that they had sought to overcome. "I am you," Jathik whispered, its voice now a gentle breeze in its mind. "And you are me." His consciousness began to unravel, thread by thread, as they realized that they were forever lost in the labyrinth of their own mind. And so they remained, trapped in an endless nightmare from which there was no escape. The last vestiges of their sanity were consumed by the void, leaving nothing but a hollow shell of what once was.